if you see the actual optimal way that they lead you through the game in New Vegas, you actually are supposed to go south, and then you're supposed to go east and then up in order to do the progression of the game. Recently, Josh Sawyer had a video that he put out. If you don't know who Josh Sawyer is, you don't. It's fine. I thought I might have brought him up once or twice, but he...
Not offhandedly.
Not offhanded. Okay, so Josh Sawyer worked for Black Isle Studios and worked for Obsidian, and so he was pretty well into Fallout New Vegas. He was very important there, and then did game direction for the company after that. Point is that he worked extensively on Fallout New Vegas for this for the topic of this conversation. And so he was talking about game balance in relation to informing the player in New Vegas if they were already familiar with Fallout 3. And so what he had said was that Fallout 3, the hot take that he gave is that Fallout 3 is not a hard game. I don't think that's actually a hot take, personally. I think that Fallout 3 is a pretty manageable game in most regards. But what he wanted to do with New Vegas was to inform the player very early on that they would not be able to necessarily slide around the map like they usually could in a Fallout 3. And one of the ways that he did that...
Valley full of Deathclaws.
Yeah. There's a passageway. If you're not familiar with Fallout, if you head north directly from Goodsprings, there is one pathway up into the mountains that is filled with cazadors that are not fun to deal with. And then if you take the road north, thinking that that's going to be an easy way for you to get to New Vegas, you will be met with an excavation site, a pit, that is just full of Deathclaws. It's not easy. There's also another cutaway that you can go through, but you will be greeted with a lot of rad scorpions if you go that way. And these are not going to be easy for you if you're just equipped with, a pistol. This is going to be very tricky. And
the BB gun.
Yes, exactly. The BB gun. Get yourself the long rifle that they give you at the beginning that, is the single-shot rifle. Or the 22 pistol, little 22 LR. But the point is that was purposeful. And the reason why he wanted to do that was to explain to players that there are very challenging areas of the map specifically, and that just free roaming was going to be something very tricky for you to do. I thought that you might be a good person to talk to about this, because when you've built game worlds before, you kind of did this too. To a point where, players could end up stumbling into something that is obviously above their ability.
It's above their pay grade, yeah.
It's above their pay grade. And I found that this was a really interesting idea about game design. Because I guess there's two kind of schools of thought. The one that would suggest that, sure, you can go wherever you want on the map. It's fun. There's stuff to be out there. And one that goes, oh, you got to be careful about this world. And I think it has everything to do with how you want players to interact with it. Elden Ring, which I was playing again recently, before anyone asks, it was with mods. Don't at me. The point is that that Elden Ring is one of those games that does tell you to go off in whatever direction you want, but it does not take long for you to realize that if you go in the wrong direction, there is a giant-ass dragon that is going to come down and breathe fire all over you, and you're not ready for it.
Well, for Elden Ring, that's more about skill than it is about, player progression anyways, isn't it?
You'd have to have some pretty high skill out of the gate in order to take on the dragon, or you'd have to know a lot about the systems of the game.
Well, that's like the people that beat the Asylum Demon in the first try instead of running away from him.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that has everything to do with experience. Something else that's actually interesting on that topic is that at the end of that video, Sawyer discusses that there is a difference between informing a new player and a veteran one. Because, every time he would release a game, about 3 or 4 months down the road, he'd have somebody kind of go, I started to realize that, if you power level here, you get to these couple pieces of gear. The game's not really that difficult after 1,000 hours of playing it. And it's like, yeah, I get that. If you've played for that long, you can figure out how to make the game easier. But for a new player, it's going to still be difficult because you're not informed about that, and you don't know all the ins and outs of the system.
Yeah.
This is true of a lot of Souls-likes, too. Once you learn a lot of the systems of Souls-likes, it becomes far easier to figure out how to utilize them. Metroidvania, same deal. But when it comes to open world games, the impetus that comes out is that it's an open world game, therefore I can go wherever I want, like it's a sandbox.
You can go and do what you want.
You can go and do what you want. So it seems weird when somebody kind of goes, well, actually, we kind of built it so that you really don't just go anywhere if you're new out of the box. And that there is, if you see the actual optimal way that they lead you through the game in New Vegas, you actually are supposed to go south, and then you're supposed to go east and then up in order to do the progression of the game to get to New Vegas.
Even Breath of the Wild, for instance.
Oh, yeah. You can go right to Chaos Ganon. Yeah, Calamity Ganon, I should say. Yeah. Yeah.
It's built in such a way, you can go anywhere, but like, what's it, Rasputin, the gaming for a non-gamer?
Yep.
He had his wife the woman who lives in his house, colloquially known as.
Yeah.
He had her play that, and she went a different route than he expected, because the game kind of pushes you to kind of go in one direction to do it, because this is the optimal path they want you to do, but you can do it a different way. It just becomes a lot more difficult. But for that one, he was like, they didn't really say to do this. They kind of just hinted at it, but if you're a new player, then you're not going to get those hints. Or even a new gamer, you're not necessarily going to take those hints.
Right.
So
I always find it kind of interesting with open world games especially to see how many different ways a player that's just gotten dropped into this world for the first time will process information, because like no two people are going to do the same thing. So if you're purposefully trying to like inform the player of difficult areas and stuff, you're gonna get more people trying to go in the same general direction. But the choices that they make and what they decide to like really cling on to is verifiably different, like between one playoff and another. So that's, I think, what's really interesting. Like New Vegas is one of those games where it kind of tells you, hey, you might want to go this way, and it's the optimal way to go. Where, it's kind of the default way that you're supposed to go, and you go down toward Canton and, around there, and you hit quests along the way, but you don't have to. And if you were to be one of those people that look at the map and go, oh, I need to get here, you'd go, okay, what's the quickest way to get there? And it would cut off large parts of the map, but put you through some much more complicated and difficult areas in order to do that. What kind of, one of these do you think is a more interesting experience? The kind of one that lets you slide all over the map, or the one that tries to inform you that the world is very dangerous and therefore there are certain places that you really should be going?
I think both are interesting. I think it really just comes down to what you want your players to experience. Do you want them to go and go, oh, there's a valley full of Deathclaws, I guess I should be careful or avoid that for now? Or do you want them to be able to kind of just slurp around and do anything? And it really depends on what your player experience is supposed to be. But like World of Warcraft, we're going to use this as an example. We've talked about it before.
Yes.
It used to be more so that all of the areas, the zones in the game, were kind of level gated. Mm-hmm. This zone is for levels 1 through 15. This zone's for levels like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, something like that. And then they changed it more recently so that most of the levels have a range from like 10 to 60 or something like that.
Sure.
So that you can just quest wherever you want. You don't need to go from, Durotar to Ashenvale.
Sure.
to level. You can now go wherever you want. And that is great if you want people to kind of go places and just kind of pick and choose.
Mm-hmm.
But for a new players who aren't familiar with like where the story did originally go in that, won't know that, you should start in Durotar as an orc. And then you're going to go to the Barrens. And from the Barrens, you can either go to here or to Ashenvale. And then you can go to up into Felwood. And then all these stories kind of weave together.
Sure.
Narratively. But, that was because the level gating meant that you would have to go from there. And then the next area would be appropriate for your level, but also be led into from the first area.
Sure.
With the level scaling differently, without everything being open to you to do whatever, you can pick and choose. So it gets rid of the danger factor there. Like, yes, that area is way over leveled for you. You can go there, but it's going to kill you if you're not careful.
Yeah. Like
extremely careful.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do that before. You could be like, yes, Eastern Plaguelands. I'm going to run through here to get to Light's Hope Chapel in Western Plaguelands.
Right.
So I'm just going to run through there and hope nothing aggroes on and kills me on the way.
Yeah.
So you'd have to be very methodical about it. Or lucky. A little bit of both.
Right.
But now it's just like, these are just all my level. And I can just run through there. And if anything stops me, I can fight it and kill it. Because it's all scaled to my level.
Sure.
And so I think both have their own merits for both types of things. Because yes, I would love a world that's fully explorable at my leisure.
Mm-hmm.
I can go wherever I want, whatever level I want, do anything I want, and it will be appropriately leveled for me. And that's fun. Because then you can just do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
But it also takes away that little bit of risk and challenge factor of, oops, I'm in way over my head. The creatures here can murder me in one shot.
There's an interesting difference between, game design philosophy when it comes to either the world scaling with you or the world just being static and you starting to get level progression. And Fallout 3 was the first one. It really scaled with you. New Vegas did not do that as much. New Vegas was much more of a lot of things can kill you very easily, and you're probably going to have to get better in order to deal with it. I personally have always maybe this is why Fallout New Vegas is one of my favorite games for one of these reasons, is that I do like game worlds where things are different kinds of challenge in different areas, because I feel like it's more realistic to a game world. You're starting out in an RPG, you're going to be level 1, you got nothing equipped, and sliding all over the map seems unrealistic if you're supposed to make it feel dangerous. Trying to make it feel like it's really lived in. I'm not going to be walking up to giants. I'm not going to be walking up to dragons in Skyrim immediately. I want to take a minute and think about that. That's like when you're going up to High Hrothgar, and there's that one thing where the ice troll drops down and attacks you, where it's like, oh, this is a skill check moment to see if you're able to handle this before you continue on. There's those moments where it makes it very clear that this is supposed to be a dangerous world, and trying to navigate it, almost path it out in your head, is one of the challenges. In a world like Dead Island, when they originally did that one of my biggest complaints was that every zombie scales directly to your level. So when you go in and all the zombies in an area are level 1, and you're level 1, you level up to 2, you get a skill, but then all the zombies are now level 2 all of a sudden. And so I was like, well, I don't even understand what the process of progression is in that game because of that. Because I want to feel like, some things are going to be simpler, some things are going to be more difficult, and maybe if it is difficult, it's giving me a little bit of a signal that, oh, maybe there's a different way around this. When I've dealt with boss battles in a Souls-like, for instance, I start to realize that if you're not doing a lot of damage to them immediately, it might not just be that you have to do, like, law of attrition and just keep hammering them on the same thing forever. It might be because they have a weak spot, there's something else that you were supposed to do in order to make this easier, that there's something else that you're missing, and that's the reason. And so, for me, that just informs me that the game world is very dangerous, but it is not impossible, because learning the systems, learning the mechanics, informs you about like how to actually navigate it, or that there is a real benefit to leveling up and getting more powerful and getting better equipment, because now you can take on challenges that you couldn't previously do. So for me, I like that as a concept. I didn't necessarily think about it in the terms that Sawyer was putting out there, that it was like purposeful, just throw a bunch of Deathclaws up there, and now we're going to force people down another path. Because the interesting thing too about that game, because I could talk about New Vegas forever, but the interesting thing about that is if you do power through the areas like with the Deathclaws, you get to very important story areas that they don't normally give you, like to the Great Khan's encampment, or if you're going straight across to New Vegas through that Valley of Death with all of the rad scorpions, you come across the Brotherhood of Steel bunker. Not that you necessarily can do much about it right away, but you go, huh, what's this about? And if you'd played the game before, you might have more context for that when you get across it, but you would run across those things earlier on in the game, and maybe not know why, but know that they might be important later on. But you'd have to power through those. So
and it really comes down to like what you want the player's experience to be like.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want them to feel like they're leveling and getting skills and powering up to a point that they can take these threats as trivial, then that would be like, all right, things are static. They stay the level they're going to stay. They don't level with you. You can overpower them by just being a higher level.
Sure.
You know, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of things do that. And I think it can be a really rewarding because you're like, yes, I spent all this time leveling. Now I can just come back here and blast you with like a fireball. You know? And that feels good.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, where you said you're just gaining skills, but the zombies level with you, you know, that doesn't feel good in the same way necessarily, because that is just, all right, well, I've learned something new, but these guys still require the same amount of effort and skill to do. So maybe the skills you get make it easier to take care of them.
Right.
Or you have a new set of skills and equipment, and that makes it easier to deal with them, but they're not easier foes.
Right. Intriguingly, I will mention, because I had talked about Dead Island and Dead Island 2, because I played some Dead Island 2. Dead Island 2 changes that level progression entirely. And so there are areas of the map that basically have, similar to Warcraft, old school Warcraft, where you would have suggested levels for different areas of LA when you're going around. But inside of that, you would have enemies that are a little bit lower level or more basic, and then you would have some places that you're obviously supposed to come back to later, where all of a sudden there will just be an enemy with a skull icon, and you are not getting past them without some serious skill in order to deal with them, and you probably want to avoid that specifically and come back later. They do that, and I did say that I like Dead Island 2 a lot more, probably for that reason. One of the reasons why I like this as a formula is because there's a certain satisfaction that you get from feeling underpowered in a world and then figuring out how to utilize the world and how to navigate that world so that by the end you feel far more powerful and you feel far more accomplished in that world. And when games kind of take that part of level progression away, it kind of undermines the overall experience of being a survivor, being the hero, going on that journey, doing that kind of thing. And by creating worlds that are big and bold and difficult, that you really have to work at to not just become more powerful, but also learn how the world works, gives you that kind of sense of actual progression like I understood it. So now when I go through New Vegas, I will usually try to cross the valley that goes through.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. What I'll, I've done it because I want to see if I can get around the Deathclaws, but the path that I usually take is like where the Brotherhood of Steel bunker is, that kind of path through the mountains, and see if you can avoid the Deathclaws and everything and head straight to New Vegas. From there, bypassing a lot of the other stuff. Where, intriguingly enough, the story will progress and all of the side missions you don't have to do at all. You can actually cut off about, I think, 3 main story missions if you go straight from Good Springs to New Vegas, because you don't have to go through Primm, you don't have to go through Canton, you don't have to go through Boulder City at all. You don't have to hit those at all, or anything that's happening with the conflicts there, and get more information. If you know that this is where you have to go, you can just go there. Head toward the giant tower in the sky. You'll be fine. As long as you can avoid the big-ass rad scorpions that are going to try to kill you. So now, when I usually do it, though, I will go that direction and try to head through, through the mountains to get there. But I only know to do that, or how to do that, because I've played enough to have learned it. I would not expect a new player to understand that that's something you could try, or that there are ways to navigate around it to get through there. So, learning about and educating the player on how to do this is really important, so that eventually you can go back to the game director and say, hey, after 1,000 hours, I found out that this game's actually real simple. It's actually pretty easy. It's the it's like the game's done quick kind of thing. Where
after my 6,000 hours in World of Warcraft, yeah, it's simple.
Yeah, it's very simple. It's that thing where with speedrunning, where people will kind of like go, Outer Worlds, there are speed runs where you can get through it in like 11 minutes. You can go through the whole game. And people go, well, if you can get through the game in 11 minutes, it can't be all that good. And you're like, you don't even understand how many hours they had to put in to figure out how to get through that in 11 minutes. I
don't want to work.
No, they had to play that game for 50, 60 hours to figure out how to actually do that in 11 minutes. So, no, you can't just... It's not just that you do it in 11 minutes. Yeah, you can technically play like Gone Home in under a minute. But you wouldn't know how when you start the game. Like, that's the thing. You can learn how to do it, and the learning process is one of the fun parts for players. But yeah, different philosophies when it comes to game design and balance.
And what you want your players to get out of the game.
Yeah. I guess you could say it's kind of the difference between a game world that balances to the player and one that is purposefully imbalanced to the player. And me personally, I think that the imbalance is very interesting. But I do understand that some players do like the idea of the balanced game world for levels and scaling. But I guess the question that I would pass on to everybody else is, how do you feel about it? Do you like a balanced game world or an imbalanced game world? And what do you find fun about those mechanics? You can let us know in the comments down below.
Yes, let us know. Tell us what your favorite story of being killed by a boss that was way too high level for you.
Oh my god. I probably have a few of those. There's plenty of bosses where I start to think that I can handle them, and then I keep dying, and I go, well, we're coming back to you later. Coming back way later. Which is always annoying in like a Souls-like, because it's like, I have to just let my souls go. Whatever your currency is that dropped, it's like, yeah,